She gave me up for adoption, and now she wants to reconnect with my children. I guess I should start by saying that this isn't the kind of post I ever thought I'd be writing. Honestly, even as I sit here, I'm not sure how to put all of this into words. My emotions are a complete mess right now, and I could really use some advice. So here's the thing. I was adopted. I've always known. My adoptive parents, who I call mom and dad because that's what they are to me, were very open about it from the start. They told me the story of how I came into their lives, a little baby, just a few months old, brought into their home when they couldn't have children of their own. They never hid the fact that I had a biological mother out there somewhere, but it was something we didn't talk about much as I got older. It wasn't like I was forbidden from asking, but I think they wanted to focus on being my family, and I never felt like I was missing anything. Still, growing up, there were always questions in the back of my mind. What kind of person was my biological mother? Why did she give me up? Did she ever think about me? Did she wonder what kind of life I was living, what kind of person I'd become? Those thoughts would pop up now and then, but I was mostly at peace with the whole situation. My life was good. I had a family who loved me, and I didn't feel the need to dig into the past, at least not until now. I should mention that I'm now 32 years old, married to a wonderful man, and a mother of 2 beautiful children, a boy and a girl, ages 5 and 3. I've always thought of my family as complete, and while I've occasionally thought about my biological mother over the years, I never felt the urge to search for her. I had everything I needed, or at least I thought I did. But life has a funny way of throwing you curveballs when you least expect it. A few weeks ago, I received a message that completely blindsided me. It was from a woman named Janet, my biological mother. After 32 years of silence, she wants to reconnect. I can't even begin to describe the whirlwind of emotions I felt when I first saw her name in my inbox. Shock, definitely. Confusion, absolutely. But also, anger. Yeah, I was angry. How could she just pop back into my life like this? After all this time? Why now? And what does she want from me? I didn't ask for this, and I certainly wasn't prepared for it. The thing is, I'd already made peace with the fact that I'd never know her. Growing up, I sometimes fantasized about what it would be like to meet her, but it was just that, a fantasy. I never actually expected it to happen, and I wasn't sure I wanted it to. My life has been full without her in it, and opening that door now feels risky, especially with my children involved. I know some of you might be wondering what exactly she said in the message, so let me give you a little more context. Janet, yes, I'm calling her by her first name, because mom doesn't feel right, wrote a pretty long email. She started off by saying that she's thought about me every single day since she gave me up for adoption. She said that not a moment has gone by where she hasn't wondered how I was doing, if I was happy, if I was loved. She explained that she was very young when she had me, just 19 years old, and that she didn't feel like she had the means or support to raise a child at the time. She said giving me up was the hardest decision she's ever made, but she did it because she wanted me to have a better life, one she couldn't give me back then. I'll admit, reading that part of the message was emotional. I can't imagine how hard it must have been for her, and I do feel sympathy for her. But at the same time, I can't help but feel conflicted. She gave me up, and I get that she had her reasons, but she wasn't a part of my life. She wasn't there for my first steps, my first words, my birthdays, my graduations. She wasn't there when I needed a shoulder to cry on, or when I needed advice as a teenager trying to navigate the world. My parents were. And now, after all these years she wants back in, it just doesn't sit right with me. What really threw me for a loop, though, was the part where she mentioned my kids. She said she knows I have 2 children, my son and daughter, and she would love the chance to get to know them, to be a part of their lives. That's when the anger really kicked in. I mean, how can she expect to meet my children when she wasn't even a part of my life? It feels presumptuous, like she's trying to make up for lost time in a way that just isn't realistic. Since reading that message, I've been going back and forth in my head about what to do. Part of me is curious. I mean, this is my biological mother. She's the woman who gave birth to me, who made the decision that ultimately led me to the life I have now. I'm not sure if I owe her anything, but the curiosity is still there. On the other hand, I feel like opening this door could lead to complications I'm not ready for. What if she turns out to be someone I don't want in my life? What if she causes tension with my adoptive parents, who have been nothing but supportive and loving to me? And most importantly, what if she isn't someone I want around my children? My kids are everything to me, and the idea of introducing them to someone I know nothing about feels reckless. I'm their mother, and it's my job to protect them. But does that mean shutting Janet out completely? Or should I at least hear her out? I've shared this whole situation with my husband, and while he's supportive, he's also leaving the decision up to me. He understands how complicated this is, but he's also cautious about how much we let her into our lives. He's as protective of our kids as I am, which I'm grateful for, but that also means he's not really pushing me one way or the other. It's all on me to decide. So that's where I'm at right now, torn, confused, and honestly a little scared. I've been reading through this email over and over again, trying to figure out what to do, but I'm just not sure. Has anyone else been through something like this? Should I even consider reconnecting with her, or is it better to leave the past buried? I could really use some advice right now. Update 2. The decision to meet Janet wasn't an easy one. I spent countless nights tossing and turning, my mind racing with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answers to. Would she explain why she gave me up? Could I handle hearing the truth, whatever it was? I wasn't just Emily, the woman she gave up anymore. I was a mother now, and that changed everything. If I was going to open this door, it wasn't just for me. It was for my kids, too. The anxiety building up to that day was unreal. I kept going back and forth in my head, imagining different scenarios of how this meeting could go. Would she be cold and distant? Would she cry and beg for forgiveness? I was so used to living with the questions, but now answers were just hours away, and I didn't know if I was ready for them. Yet, despite the storm of emotions swirling inside me, a part of me was driven by a deep need for closure. The day finally came. I decided on a neutral location. Something about meeting her at a cafe felt safer, less personal, as if it would shield me from the weight of what was about to happen. I arrived first, of course, my heart pounding as I stared at the door, waiting for her to walk in. I had never felt this kind of nervousness before, not even before major life events. This was something deeper, something that felt life-altering. Then she walked in. My first reaction was how unassuming she looked. She didn't have the larger-than-life aura I had built up in my head. Janet looked normal, like any other woman you'd pass by on the street and never think twice about. Her face was lined with age, her hair streaked with gray, and there was a kind of weariness about her, as if life had taken its toll. I wasn't sure what I expected, but I didn't expect her to look so ordinary. She spotted me right away, and our eyes met across the cafe. The tension was unbearable as she made her way toward me. Janet was nervous. I could see it in the way she fiddled with her bag, in the hesitant steps she took. When she finally sat down, there was this moment of awkward silence, where neither of us knew how to start. How do you even begin a conversation like this? Hi, she said softly, her voice shaky. It's so good to see you. I nodded, unsure of what to say back. It was surreal. Here I was, face to face with the woman who gave me life, yet she felt like a complete stranger. Janet launched into her story pretty quickly, almost as if she needed to get it out before she lost the nerve. She told me how she was young, alone, and completely unprepared to be a mother when she had me. She claimed that giving me up for adoption was the hardest thing she ever did, that she thought about me every day since, wondering where I was, what kind of life I had. As she spoke, I listened, but I stayed guarded. I wanted to believe her, to feel some kind of connection, but I didn't. Instead, I just felt numb. All my life, I had built up this moment in my head, but hearing her talk didn't bring the sense of understanding or relief I thought it might. I found myself wondering if she was telling the truth, or just saying what she thought I wanted to hear. Then came the bombshell I wasn't ready for. I followed your life, Janet confessed. I know you have children now. I was hoping that maybe I could be a part of their lives. The air felt like it had been sucked out of the room. I had prepared myself for a conversation about why she gave me up, but I hadn't anticipated this. She wasn't just asking for a relationship with me. She wanted to be involved with my kids, my family. I sat there in shock. Part of me felt violated. She had been watching me, knowing things about my life without me knowing anything about her. And now she wanted to meet my children? The protective part of me kicked in immediately. I couldn't let her get close to my kids. I didn't even know her. How could I possibly trust her with something so important? I could see Janet's nervousness intensify as she noticed my hesitation. She tried to explain herself, saying that she just wanted to make up for lost time, that she wanted to be a grandmother to my kids in a way she never got to be a mother to me. But her words didn't sit right with me. There was a desperation in her voice, and it left me feeling uneasy. It wasn't just about reconnecting with me, it felt like she was trying to fill a void in her own life, and that worried me. When the meeting finally ended, I walked out of the cafe feeling more confused than ever. I had gone in hoping for clarity, hoping that I might leave with a sense of closure, but instead I left with more questions than answers. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to Janet's sudden desire to reconnect. On the way home, I replayed the conversation in my head over and over. Was Janet being sincere? Or was there something else motivating her? Why did she want to meet my kids so badly? Was it guilt? Regret? Or was she looking for something else, some kind of redemption? By the time I got home, I felt emotionally drained. Ryan noticed immediately and asked me how it went. I told him everything, how Janet seemed regretful, how she admitted to following my life from a distance, and how she dropped the bombshell about wanting to meet our children. Ryan listened quietly, nodding in all the right places, but when I finished, he was as cautious as ever. I don't know. It sounds like she's trying to make up for lost time, but I don't like that she wants to meet the kids so soon. You don't even know her yet. I think we need to take this slow. His words echoed what I was already feeling, but hearing him say it out loud solidified my doubts. I couldn't let Janet meet the kids. Not yet. Maybe not ever. There was too much at stake, and I wasn't sure if I could trust her intentions. I ended up updating my Reddit post that night, laying everything out for the readers who had been following my story. I told them about the meeting, about how Janet seemed nervous and regretful, but how her request to meet my children had left me feeling unsettled. I asked for their advice. What would they do in my shoes? Was I being too harsh? Should I give her a chance to explain herself more? Or should I trust my gut and keep my distance? As I typed out the update, I realized how lost I felt, how unsure I was about what the right decision should be. All I knew was that I needed to protect my kids, whatever that meant. Update 3. The moment I got home after meeting Janet, I knew I had to talk to my adoptive parents and Ryan. I couldn't sit with these swirling thoughts alone any longer. It was too heavy. My adoptive parents had always been there for me, never making me feel like I was anything less than their daughter, but I couldn't ignore the fact that Janet's sudden reappearance was going to shake things up. I wasn't prepared for how much, though. I called my mom first. As soon as she picked up, I could hear the warmth in her voice, like she'd been waiting to hear from me. "Hey, sweetie. How did it go?" Her tone was light, but I knew she had her own worries about the meeting. "It was confusing," I said, which was putting it mildly. I launched into everything, telling her about Janet's explanations, how she said giving me up was the hardest thing she ever did, and then of course the bombshell about wanting to meet my kids. By the time I finished, there was silence on the other end. "Mom," I asked, suddenly worried I'd upset her. She finally spoke, but her voice sounded strained. I don't know what to say, Emily. This is a lot to take in." I could tell she was hurt, not by anything I'd done, but by Janet resurfacing like this, throwing our whole family dynamic into question. My mom had been the one who was there for every scraped knee, every bedtime story. The thought of Janet stepping in now, after all these years, must have felt like an invasion. "Do you think she's being sincere?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "I want to believe her, but the way she immediately asked to meet the kids, it just felt off." My mom sighed, and I could almost see the tension in her face through the phone. "Emily, I don't want to tell you what to do, but you need to be careful. She could hurt you again, and I don't want to see that happen. Not to you, and certainly not to your children." That hit hard. My mom was right. I had to protect myself, but more importantly, I had to protect my kids. Still, a part of me felt conflicted. What if Janet was sincere? What if she had genuinely changed and wanted to make amends? After talking to my mom, I told my dad. His reaction was similar, but more straightforward. "She didn't get to raise you, Emily. We did. And now she wants to swoop in and play grandma? I'm not sure that's fair to any of us." It stung hearing that, but I understood where he was coming from. My parents had poured everything into raising me, giving me a life full of love and support. The idea of Janet trying to slide into that role now, after all this time, felt like an intrusion. But then again, wasn't this exactly what I'd always wondered about, why she gave me up? And now that I had answers, was it fair to just shut her out completely? By the time I talked to Ryan, I was emotionally drained. He listened carefully, as always, taking in every detail of the meeting without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment before saying, "I get why you're conflicted, but we need to think about the kids first. If there's even a small chance this could mess with them, we have to be careful." I knew he was right. Ryan was always the calm, rational one in our relationship, and his steady presence kept me grounded. "So what do you think we should do?" I asked, desperate for his perspective. "I'm not saying no outright," he said carefully, "but if we even consider letting Janet into our lives, it has to be on our terms. Slowly, cautiously. And if you're uncomfortable with it at any point, we stop." His response was more neutral than my parents', but still cautious. He wasn't dismissing Janet completely, but he was clearly wary. I appreciated that he wasn't pushing me to make a decision right away. He was giving me space to process everything, which was exactly what I needed. The tension between my adoptive family and the situation with Janet was already starting to build. I hadn't even made any decisions yet, but the mere fact that Janet wanted to reconnect felt like a bomb that was about to go off. My parents were hurt and protective, Ryan was cautious but open, and I was stuck in the middle, trying to figure out what the right thing to do was. I couldn't shake the feeling that no matter what I decided, someone was going to get hurt. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room, staring at my phone. My mind was spinning with questions. Was it selfish of me to even consider letting Janet into my life after everything my adoptive parents had done for me? Or was it selfish to deny Janet the chance to be part of my life now that she had reached out? I needed clarity. I needed advice from people who had been through something like this. So I turned to Reddit again, updating the community that had been following my story. I posted the update and waited. Some people encouraged me to take things slow, to put up boundaries and protect my children first. Others warned me about letting Janet back into my life at all, telling stories of their own about birth parents who reappeared only to bring more chaos and pain. As I read through the comments, I realized there wasn't going to be an easy answer. No one could make this decision for me. But knowing that others had been through similar struggles helped. I wasn't alone in this. The comments made me reflect on how complicated family dynamics could be, especially when they involved adoption, biological parents, and the families who raised us. I didn't want to hurt my adoptive parents. I didn't want to put my children in a difficult position, but I also didn't want to shut Janet out without giving her a chance, even if it was a small one. As I scrolled through the replies, one comment stood out to me. Family isn't just about biology. It's about who's been there for you, who's loved you, and who's earned a place in your life. You get to decide who that is. I read that line over and over, letting it sink in. It was true. At the end of the day, I had to choose who I wanted in my life and in my children's lives. And that choice wasn't just about Janet. It was about what was best for my family, the family I had built, the people who had been there for me through everything. The weight of the decision still felt overwhelming, but for the first time, I started to feel like maybe I had more control over this situation than I thought. Update 4. Janet's true intentions unfold. After the emotional roller coaster of the first meeting, I wasn't sure I even wanted to see Janet again. But curiosity got the better of me, and part of me hoped that maybe, just maybe, there was something real behind her desire to reconnect. Maybe she had more to say that could help me understand everything. Or maybe I just needed closure once and for all. We scheduled a second meeting. This time, I made sure to pick a quieter cafe, away from the hustle and bustle. I didn't want distractions, just answers. The tension leading up to it was unbearable. Ryan and my adoptive parents weren't thrilled about me meeting her again, but I felt like I had to. I needed to see if Janet's intentions were as pure as she made them seem. Janet showed up looking more put together this time, like she had something to prove. She was wearing a neatly pressed blouse, her makeup meticulously done, but there was a nervous energy about her. "So how have you been since we last talked?" she asked. I shrugged, trying to keep it casual. "I've been okay, still trying to wrap my head around everything, honestly." Janet nodded and leaned in a little closer. "I know it's a lot to take in, Emily, but I want to be honest with you. There's more I didn't get to say during our first meeting." I braced myself, unsure of what was coming next. Janet started talking about her life after giving me up. She told me about how she'd gone on to have more children, 2 sons, both of whom were grown now. She mentioned that she wasn't close to them anymore, something about differences in their lives pulling them apart. There was a sadness in her voice when she spoke about them, but there was also something else I couldn't quite put my finger on, almost like she was trying to guilt me into feeling sorry for her. "They don't visit much anymore," she continued, her voice growing softer. "I live alone now. It's just me, rattling around in that big house, thinking about all the mistakes I made." I nodded, trying to keep my emotions in check. "That sounds tough." "It is," Janet said, sighing deeply. "But reconnecting with you, well, it feels like a second chance, you know? Like maybe this is how things are supposed to be. And your kids, well, I'd love to be a part of their lives. It would complete everything." That word, complete, sent a chill down my spine. I hadn't expected her to bring up my kids again so soon, but there it was, hanging in the air like an unspoken demand. Janet wasn't just looking to reconnect with me, she wanted access to my children, and she wasn't being subtle about it. I sat back in my chair, trying to process her words, complete everything I repeated, my voice a little sharper than I intended. Janet looked startled, as if she hadn't expected me to question her. "I just mean, well, I've lost touch with my other children. You're the only one I have left. I want to be part of your family, Emily. I want to be there for you and your kids." Her tone was starting to make me uncomfortable. It wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't even about my kids. It was about her and what she wanted. The more she spoke, the more I began to feel like she was trying to fill some kind of void in her own life, a void I wasn't sure I could or should fill. "I don't know if that's what I want," I said carefully, trying to keep my tone calm. Janet's face fell, and for a split second, I saw something darker flash across her features, disappointment, maybe even anger. But she quickly masked it with a tight smile. "I understand," she said, but her voice had lost its warmth. "It's just, I thought maybe you'd want to give me the chance to make up for lost time. After all, I gave you up because I thought it was best for you. Don't I deserve this chance now?" The way she said it, like she was owed something, hit me like a ton of bricks. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. This wasn't just about reconciling or mending old wounds. This was about her need to feel like she hadn't failed completely, like reconnecting with me and meeting my kids could somehow redeem her. It wasn't about me or my family, it was about her, and that realization made me feel nauseous. "I don't know if I can give you that," I said slowly, trying to stay composed. Janet's smile faltered, and her eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "Emily, I'm your mother. I made a mistake, but I did it out of love. You can't just shut me out forever. I think I deserve to know my grandchildren." There it was again, that word, deserve. Like she had some right to waltz back into my life after decades and claim a place in my children's lives. I could feel the walls closing in on me. "I need to think about what's best for my kids," I said firmly, not backing down. Janet's expression hardened. "And you don't think I could be a good influence on them? You don't think I've suffered enough? I've been watching from the sidelines, hoping for this chance, and now you're telling me I don't deserve it." Her voice had taken on an edge of desperation, and I suddenly realized that this wasn't going to end the way I'd hoped. Janet wasn't looking for forgiveness or reconciliation. She was looking for validation. She wanted to use me, my kids, to fill a void in her life, to ease her guilt, to complete her picture-perfect idea of redemption. I stood up, my hands trembling slightly as I gathered my things. "I'm sorry, Janet, but I can't do this. Not right now." Janet's face twisted into something bitter. "After everything I sacrificed for you, this is how you repay me? By shutting me out." I froze, my stomach churning. The passive-aggressive comment cut through me like a knife, and I knew right then and there that I couldn't trust her. This wasn't about love or regret. This was manipulation, plain and simple. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the cafe, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't look back, but I could feel her eyes burning into me as I left. As I drove home, my mind raced with everything that had just happened. I wasn't just reconnecting with a mother who regretted her past mistakes. I was dealing with someone who was trying to manipulate her way into my life, into my children's lives, without considering what was best for us. I pulled into the driveway. I knew I had to tell Ryan and my parents what had happened, but more than that, I had to make a decision about Janet's place in our lives. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if there was any room for her at all. Update 5. After the last meeting with Janet, I felt like I was in a fog. The passive-aggressive comments, the emotional manipulation, it all left me feeling more confused than ever. My mind kept replaying her words over and over, wondering if I was being too harsh, or if I was simply seeing the truth for what it was. Ryan was supportive through all of this. We had long conversations about Janet and what her presence in our lives would mean for the kids. He was calm, rational, and reminded me that it was okay to set boundaries, especially when it came to protecting our family. My adoptive parents, on the other hand, were a little more direct. They didn't trust Janet from the beginning and felt I should have cut ties after the first meeting. But they didn't push, They just wanted to make sure I knew they were there for me no matter what. I spent a lot of time reflecting on everything that had happened. I thought about Janet's sudden reappearance, her attempts to reconnect, and how, in the end, it felt like it was more about her redemption than truly rebuilding a relationship. And while part of me wanted to give her the chance she was asking for, I couldn't ignore the red flags. Her constant focus on my kids, her insistence that she deserved to be part of their lives, none of it sat right with me. Ultimately, I made a decision. I wasn't going to allow Janet to meet my children. It wasn't out of spite or anger. It was about protecting my family, about ensuring that my kids grew up in a healthy, safe environment surrounded by people who truly had their best interests at heart. I couldn't risk letting someone into their lives who might manipulate them the way she had tried to manipulate me. The next step was harder than I expected. I knew I had to write Janet a message, something final, something that would give me the closure I needed while also making it clear where I stood. I sat at my computer for what felt like hours, starting and stopping, trying to find the right words. Eventually, I just let my heart speak. Here's what I wrote. Dear Janet, I've spent a lot of time thinking about our meetings and everything you've shared with me. I appreciate your honesty and your willingness to open up about the past. It can't have been easy to tell me those things, and I respect that. First, I want to thank you for making the decision to give me up for adoption all those years ago. It's not something many people would have had the strength to do, but I believe you did it because you thought it was what was best for me. And in many ways, it was. I was raised by two incredible people who gave me everything I could have ever asked for: a loving home, a stable family, and a childhood filled with joy. For that, I will always be grateful to you. That being said, I've come to a decision about our relationship moving forward. I don't think it's in the best interest of my family, especially my children, to pursue a closer relationship with you. While I understand your desire to reconnect, I feel that your focus has shifted too much toward what you want, rather than what's best for all of us. My children are my priority, and I need to make choices that protect them and ensure their well-being. This doesn't mean I harbor any ill will toward you. I don't. I hope that you can find peace and fulfillment in your life, and I wish you nothing but the best. But I have to do what's right for my family, and that means drawing this boundary. Thank you again for reaching out and for allowing me to be adopted into such a wonderful family. I hope you can understand my decision. Sincerely, Emily. After I hit send, I stared at the screen for a long time. A wave of emotions washed over me: relief, sadness, a little bit of guilt, but most of all, I felt a sense of peace. I had made the decision that was right for me and my family, and that was what mattered most. In the days that followed, I kept waiting for a response from Janet, but none came. And maybe that was for the best. I had said what I needed to say, and I had done it in a way that allowed me to hold my head high. There was no need for a drawn-out back and forth or more emotional manipulation. The door was closed. Reflecting on this entire journey, I've learned so much about what family really means. It's not just about blood or genetics, it's about the people who stand by you, who love you unconditionally, who are there for you, no matter what. My adoptive parents may not have given birth to me, but they are my parents in every way that counts. They were there for me through everything, and their love never wavered. That's what family is. And Ryan, he's been my rock through all of this. His calm, steady support reminded me that I didn't have to face this alone. We are building a life together, raising our children, and that's where my focus needs to be. As for Janet, I don't know what her future holds. I hope she finds peace and the closure she's looking for, but I've realized that it's not my responsibility to give her that. My responsibility is to my children, to my family, and to myself. So to all of you who followed this journey and shared your advice, your own experiences, and your support, thank you. Your words helped guide me through one of the most difficult times of my life. I don't know what I would have done without this community. In the end, I found my own closure, even if it wasn't the storybook ending I might have hoped for. But sometimes that's how life works, and I'm okay with that.